She wasn't sneaking out to have fun. She was sneaking out to work. A 12-year-old in a diner kitchen. And the reason why will hit you hard. Graham Ellington wasn't the type to wander his own house at night. Most nights, he shut everything down by 10, locked his office door, and tried his best to silence the noise in his head. But on this night, something pulled him awake. Maybe it was the dryness in his throat. Maybe the pressure from staring at screens for 12 hours straight. Whatever it was, he slid out of bed in his Pacific Grove home and headed toward the kitchen. He expected darkness, stillness, silence. Instead, he heard water running. It wasn't loud, just a soft, steady trickle. But in a house that usually felt like a museum after midnight, even small sounds felt out of place. Graham paused in the hallway, trying to figure out if he was imagining it. But the sound didn't go away. He stepped into the wide, open kitchen, and that's when he saw her tiny shoulders. Dark braids pulled into a loose ponytail, baggy pajama pants with little stars on them, bare feet touching the cold tile floor. Talia Booker, 12 years old, too quiet for her age, too polite for her age, and absolutely not supposed to be washing dishes at 3 a.m. like she worked there. Her hands moved carefully, almost nervously, scrubbing a plate that didn't even look dirty. She didn't notice him at first. Not until he accidentally bumped his hip against the edge of the counter. Talia whipped around like she'd been caught stealing. Her eyes went wide. "Mr. Ellington, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," Graham said, lifting a hand. "I just came down for water. What are you doing awake?" "I'm just helping," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't finish earlier." "That's not your job," he told her gently, taking a few steps closer. "It's late. Really late." She shook her head quickly. "I don't mind." "Talia," he said, keeping his tone calm, "you should be asleep right now. You've got school in the morning." That's when she froze. Not physically, but in her face. Her expression slipped just enough for him to see something wasn't right. She looked scared. Not scared of him, but scared of what he was asking. She turned away from him and rinsed the plate, her hands shaking slightly. "I'm fine," she said. "Really, I'm almost done." Graham watched her for a moment. Her shoulders were too tense. Her movements felt rehearsed, like she'd done this many times before. He glanced toward the guest room hallway where he knew Marissa, her mother, was asleep between overnight cleaning tasks. He lowered his voice. "Does your mom know you're up?" Talia hesitated. It was barely 2 seconds, but enough for him to notice. "I didn't want to bother her," she whispered. "That's not what I asked." She placed the plate in the drying rack and exhaled. "She's tired. I just wanted to help." Graham studied her for a long moment. He wasn't a parent. He barely knew how to talk to kids without feeling awkward. But he could tell when someone was trying to hide something. "Talia," he said softly, "is everything okay?" Her hands froze midair. She swallowed hard. I have to go back to bed." Before he could say anything else, she turned, drying her hands on her pajama pants. She walked past him quickly, head down, like she was afraid eye contact might crack her open. He almost reached out to stop her. Almost. But then she disappeared down the hallway without another word. Graham stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the dripping faucet she forgot to turn off. The house felt too quiet again, except for the sound of something he couldn't quite name growing in the back of his mind, something that didn't sit right. He shut off the water, grabbed his glass, and stood there for a moment longer. He didn't know it yet, but that simple question, why was she washing dishes at 3 a.m., was about to drag him into a world he'd never bothered to look at before. But the strangest part was how quickly the next clue showed up, and it didn't come from Talia or Marissa. It came from a phone call the very next morning. Graham woke up the next morning with the image of Talia at the sink still stuck in his mind. He tried brushing it aside while he showered, tried ignoring it while he got dressed, even tried drowning it out with the sound of emails pinging his laptop. But nothing worked. Every few minutes, that moment replayed. Her tiny hands scrubbing a spotless dish, her shaky voice, the way she rushed off like she was running from something. By 7:30, the house was already alive. Marissa was in the hallway, wiping down the framed photographs Graham barely remembered hanging. She always moved quietly, almost like she didn't want to take up too much space. He stepped out of his office as she dusted the last frame. "Morning, Marissa." She jumped a little, then smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Ellington. I didn't know you were up already. Want breakfast?" No, not yet. He hesitated. Hey, can I ask you something? Her smile softened, but he saw her guard come up just a little. She had that look people get when they're used to preparing for bad news. Of course. He cleared his throat. Was Talia up late last night? Marissa blinked. Late? No. We both went to sleep early. Why? Graham rubbed the back of his neck. I found her washing dishes at 3 a.m. It took less than a second for her expression to change. Her shoulders stiffened. Her eyes dropped. She was up at 3? Yeah, she said she didn't want to bother you. Marissa let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry, Mr. Ellington. She shouldn't have done that. He wasn't angry, but he couldn't shake the worry. She looked exhausted. Is she all right? Yes, Marissa said quickly, too quickly. She's just been tired. Growing girl, you know. He didn't buy it, not for a second. But before he could push further, Talia appeared at the end of the hallway holding her backpack. She looked surprised to see the two of them talking. Morning, she said softly. Morning, Graham replied. You ready for school? Another hesitation. Another tiny crack he almost missed. Yeah. Marissa jumped in. We'll head out in a minute. Talia mumbled something and slipped toward the front door. Once she was out of earshot, Graham spoke again, keeping his voice low. Something's going on, Marissa. Her hands froze around the duster. It's fine, I promise. I don't think it is. She looked away, not angrily, more like she was trying not to crumble. Please, Mr. Ellington, just let me handle it. Before he could reply, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and her entire posture shifted, like her heart dropped into her stomach. Everything okay? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed the phone to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, Lord, not today. That's when he knew for sure this wasn't something small. But before he could ask what the call was about, Talia poked her head back into the hallway. Mom, we're going to be late. Marissa forced a smile. I'm coming, baby. She grabbed her purse, gave Graham a quick nod, and hurried out the door without another word. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy. Heavy enough to sit in his chest like a weight. He tried returning to work. He really did. But after 20 minutes of staring at lines of code that didn't make sense anymore, he gave up. He shut his laptop, leaned back in his chair, and exhaled. Something was off with that family. Something they were trying way too hard to hide. His phone rang before the thought even finished forming. He glanced at the caller ID, Lincoln Middle School, attendance office. A chill hit him, not fear, just instinct. He answered. This is Graham. Good morning, a woman said. We're calling to confirm that Talia Booker will be out again today. He sat up. Again? Yes, sir. This is her 3rd day this week. Graham stared at the wall, his grip tightening. She left for school this morning. The woman sounded confused. Sir, she's not here. He didn't respond. Couldn't. His mind raced back to her swollen eyes, her slow steps, the way she avoided every question that came too close to the truth. The woman on the phone spoke again. Would you like us to note her absence? No, Graham said quietly. I'll handle it. He hung up and sat there, listening to the clock ticking on the wall. Everything he thought he knew about Marissa and her daughter suddenly felt wrong, but he had no idea that the explanation he was looking for would hit him harder than anything he expected, and it all started with another conversation he wasn't prepared for. Graham didn't move for a while after hanging up. The call kept replaying in his head. This is her 3rd day this week. He thought about the look on Marissa's face that morning, the way she clutched her phone like it carried bad news, the way Talia avoided his eyes. None of it felt random anymore. By the time he finally stood up from his chair, he already knew he wasn't going to get anything done at work. He needed answers. Around 9:30, he heard the side door open, followed by footsteps and the soft thud of someone setting down cleaning supplies. Marissa must have come back from dropping off Talia, or pretending to. He walked into the hallway and found her kneeling near the baseboards with a scrub brush. She was working fast, almost frantically, like she needed her hands to stay busy. Marissa, he said. She didn't look up. I already cleaned in here, Mr. Ellington. I'm just touching up. We need to talk. Her brush paused mid-stroke. She closed her eyes, took a breath, then slowly sat back on her heels. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Graham stepped closer. I got a call from Lincoln Middle School. That was all it took. Her face went pale and her shoulders slumped, like the truth had finally caught up to her. They said Talia's been out 3 days this week, he continued. What's going on? And please, don't tell me she's sick. Marissa pressed her fingers to her forehead. I'm sorry. I didn't want you involved in this. I am involved, he said. She's in my home. If she's in trouble, I need to know. Marissa's eyes glistened. She's not in trouble. She's just tired. From what? She hesitated. He could practically see the fight happening inside her, protect her daughter, or tell the truth. Marissa, he said softly, I'm not here to judge you. Her voice cracked. You don't understand, Mr. Ellington. If I tell you everything, I might lose my job and I can't lose this job. His heart pulled tight. You're not getting fired. Talk to me. She shook her head like she didn't believe him, but then she wiped her face and forced the words out. Talia hasn't been going to school because I've been working more. She's been helping me with things at home, things I can't get to. That doesn't sound right, he said gently. She's a kid. She shouldn't be doing that. Marissa looked down at her hands. I know she shouldn't, but some days I barely have enough hours left in the day to breathe. I've been taking extra jobs, laundry houses, night cleaning, whatever I can find. So why did she lie about going to school? Because she's trying to help. Her voice shook as she added, she's been staying home so she can finish work I can't finish. She thinks it's the only way. Graham stared at her, confused. But I gave you a raise last year. You told me things were finally getting better. They were, she whispered. But then I got sick in December, real sick. I had to go to urgent care twice. They gave me meds, but the bills... She trailed off, biting her lip hard. I couldn't keep up. So you're in debt? She nodded slowly. More than I can handle. And Talia knows? That girl hears everything, she said. I try to hide it, but she pays attention. Graham tried to picture a 12-year-old skipping school because her mother was drowning in bills. It didn't sit right. Nothing about this felt like something a kid should carry. He crouched down to her level. You should have told me. I couldn't. She wiped her eyes again. I didn't want you thinking I couldn't handle my responsibilities. People like me, we don't get to mess up. One mistake, and we lose everything. The words hit him harder than he expected. He stood up slowly, trying to process everything. Where is she right now? Marissa hesitated again. She's safe, she said. She's with someone who helps me sometimes, just watching her for the morning. But the way she avoided eye contact told him she was hiding something bigger, something she wasn't ready to admit yet. He crossed his arms. Marissa, she wasn't with you when you left this morning, was she? Her silence was his answer. Where did she actually go? Marissa finally stood up, gripping the edge of the baseboard like she needed support. Please don't make me say it, not yet. Why not? Because once I do, everything changes. He didn't understand what that meant, but he could feel it in the air. Something was coming. Something she was terrified to tell him. And he was done with half-truths. But before he could push her any further, his phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID flashed a number from a place he rarely heard from. It was a diner, a small one on the edge of Mobile, Alabama. He recognized it from the receipts he'd seen in the kitchen trash over the last few weeks, receipts he thought belonged to Marissa. He answered the call slowly. Mr. Ellington, a man said, this is Blake from Harbor Street Diner. I'm sorry to bother you, but your girl didn't show up for her shift today. Everything okay? Graham's eyes widened. My girl? Yes, sir, Talia. The room spun. Shift? A 12-year-old? Working? He lowered the phone, staring at Marissa, who looked like she was seconds from falling apart. Everything he suspected wasn't even close to the truth. But the worst part was still coming, because the diner wasn't just a job for Talia. It was the reason she'd been disappearing, and what she'd been hiding was far bigger than a few missed school days. For a few seconds, Graham didn't say anything. He just stared at Marissa while the phone stayed pressed to his ear, the voice from the diner still calling his name. It felt like the world had filtered down to two sounds, his own heartbeat thudding in his chest and Marissa's sharp, uneven breathing. Mr. Ellington, you still there? The man on the line asked. Graham finally forced out the words. Yeah, I'm here. Do you know if she's coming in later? the man continued. She's usually early, and she never misses. Never misses. His stomach twisted. I'll call you back, Graham said and hung up. The moment the phone dropped to his side, Marissa covered her mouth and let out a sound he'd never heard from her, a choked sob that broke loose like she couldn't hold it in anymore. Her shoulders shook, and she backed up until she hit the wall behind her. I'm sorry, she whispered through her tears. I'm so sorry, Mr. Ellington. I didn't want you to find out like this. Graham walked toward her, speaking softly. Marissa, why is your daughter working at a diner? She shook her head violently. It wasn't supposed to be like that. She wasn't supposed to work. She was just supposed to wait for me there. But then the bills kept coming, and I was missing hours, and that place, those people, they needed help washing dishes, and she said she could do it. She said it was easy. She's 12, he said firmly. 12, Marissa. Her hands trembled. I know it's wrong. I hate myself for letting it happen. But I was desperate. The loan people kept calling, and they were saying things I didn't want her to hear. I kept falling behind. I couldn't keep up, and she saw me crying one night and said she wanted to help. That broke him a little. Graham leaned against the opposite wall and took a slow breath. You should have come to me. I couldn't, she said. I already owe you more than I can ever pay back. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. I'm not trying to take advantage of your kindness. This isn't about kindness, he said. This is about a child. Marissa wiped her eyes on the sleeve of her uniform shirt. I tried to make her stop. I told her I'd figure something out. But she kept going behind my back, slipping out with me at night, pretending she was doing homework in the corner. Then she started taking shifts in the mornings. I only found out last week she wasn't going to school at all. Graham felt heat rising in his face, not anger at her, but anger at the situation. Why didn't you pull her out of that diner the moment you found out? Because, she whispered, without that money, we lose everything. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, broken, scared, tired. She took another shaky breath and pulled something from her purse, a crumpled envelope. These are the loan statements, she said quietly. I was too embarrassed to show you. Graham took the papers from her hand and unfolded them. He didn't expect to feel sick. $5,000 borrowed, nearly $15,000 owed interest stacked on interest, fees added with no explanation, threats of property claims if she defaulted. Predatory wasn't even the right word. This was robbery dressed up in paperwork. He looked back at her. This is criminal. She let out a tired laugh. Not to them. He wanted to sit, but he stayed standing. He felt like if he sat, he might not get back up. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because every time I think I'm getting ahead, life reminds me I'm not supposed to be, Marissa whispered. That sentence sat in the room like a ghost. Graham didn't know what to say. He'd built companies, solved complex problems, raised millions in funding, all things that made him feel capable. But here he was, standing in front of a woman he'd known for years, realizing he'd been completely unaware of what she'd been carrying, completely blind. Marissa stepped closer, still wiping tears. Please don't fire me, Mr. Ellington. I'll pay the debt. I'll get her back in school. I swear I just need time. He stared at her, stunned. She even thought that was on the table. I'm not firing you, he said. I'm trying to understand. Her legs weakened, and she grabbed the wall again, trying to steady herself. When that diner called, I knew everything was about to fall apart. It doesn't have to, he said. We'll fix this. She looked at him like she wanted to believe him, but couldn't. Not yet. Graham lifted the papers again, scanning the threats at the bottom. Marissa, these people are dangerous. This isn't something you face alone. She nodded slowly, eyes swollen. I know. And Talia shouldn't be working, period. I know, she whispered again. He took another breath, trying to keep his own emotions contained. Where is she right now? I need the truth this time. Marissa hesitated, then finally broke. She's at the diner. Now? Yes. She took a morning shift because Blake said they were short. She said she'd only stay an hour, but she's been doing that more and more, and I can't stop her when she thinks she's helping. Graham grabbed his keys off the counter. Get in the car. She looked confused. Where are we going? To get your daughter, he said, and after that, we're getting the full story. Marissa covered her mouth again, tears pushing out from the corners of her eyes, but this time they weren't just tears of fear, they were tears of relief. But Graham didn't know yet that finding Talia at the diner would reveal something far worse than early shifts and skipped school, because what she was doing there wasn't just helping out. It was something she never should have been dragged into. The drive to Mobile was quiet. Too quiet. Marissa stared out the window the whole time, hands locked together like she was holding herself together piece by piece. Graham kept glancing at her, but he didn't speak. He didn't know what to say that wouldn't make things worse. The Harbor Street diner sat between an old tire shop and a barber shop that had been closed for months. The sign flickered, half the neon letters burnt out. The parking lot only had a few cars, and the kitchen vents puffed out steam that mixed with the warm Alabama air. Graham parked and killed the engine. "Stay with me," he said gently. Marissa nodded, but her fingers trembled as she opened the door. The moment they stepped inside, a bell above the door jingled. A few customers sat at scattered tables, truck drivers, a couple of older locals, a mother with a toddler. The place smelled like frying oil, coffee, and something burnt on the grill. Behind the counter, a man in his 50s looked up. He had a bald head, broad shoulders, and the kind of tired eyes that come from decades of working on your feet. "You must be Mr. Ellington," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "I'm Blake." Graham didn't waste time. "Where's Talia?" Blake nodded toward the double doors leading to the kitchen. "Back there. She got in early. Told me her mom said it was okay. I wasn't sure, but she works hard, so I didn't push it." Marissa winced. Graham didn't wait. He pushed through the doors. The heat hit him first, then the noise. Pots clanging, water spraying, plates stacking, and in the middle of it, there she was. Talia stood on an upside-down milk crate, reaching into a sink full of greasy dishes nearly as tall as she was. Her hair was tied back with a bandana, her small arms scrubbing so hard, her elbows shook. She didn't see him at first, but when she finally turned, her face dropped. "Mr. Ellington." Graham stepped closer. "Talia, what are you doing here?" Her eyes darted past him to the doorway where her mother appeared. Mom, I was only helping. I'm almost done." Marissa walked forward, her voice soft but shaking. "Baby, no, not today." Talia's chest rose and fell quickly, panic building. "I have to finish. Mr. Blake said they were backed up, and you needed the extra money, and—" "This isn't your job," Graham said, "but you don't understand." Her voice cracked. "I'm good at this, and they pay me in cash. I don't take tips. I don't talk to customers. I just wash dishes. It's easy." "That's not the point," he said, trying to steady his tone. She kept going, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them for weeks. "I'm helping. Mom works so much. She's tired all the time. I hear her crying at night. I hear the phone calls. I see the papers. I know things are bad. I can't just sit and do nothing." Marissa covered her face, breaking again. "Baby, you shouldn't have to hear those things." "But I did," Talia said, "and nobody was doing anything about it, so I did." Graham took a step toward her. "Talia, you're a kid. You shouldn't be working long hours in a kitchen, or missing school. You shouldn't be carrying this." Her lips trembled. "If I don't help, we lose our apartment. We lose everything. I can't let that happen." Her voice wavered, and finally, she looked like the child she truly was, small, overloaded, scared, and trying too hard to be someone she shouldn't have to be. Graham softened his expression and lowered himself so he was closer to eye level. "Come here." She hesitated, then stepped off the milk crate and into his arms. She didn't fully hug him, just leaned enough to show she needed support. Graham wasn't used to comforting kids, but he placed a gentle hand on her back anyway. "You're not doing this alone anymore," he said. "I promise." Behind them, pots clattered as a cook walked by. Graham glanced around the kitchen, noticing something he hadn't at first. Small buckets filled with scraps, stacks of heavy pans, steam rolling in waves. It wasn't a place for a 12-year-old, not even close. Then he noticed something else, a schedule taped to the wall, handwritten in marker. He scanned it once, then twice. Talia was on it. Not once, not twice, 5 times a week, morning shifts, lunch shifts, even a few late evenings. Blake must have felt Graham's eyes on the board because he stepped through the doorway. She came in asking for hours about a month ago. Said her mom approved. I told her she was too young, but she begged. Said she'd work in back only. She showed up every day. Never complained. Never caused trouble. Graham stared at him. You knew she was 12. Blake sighed. I figured she was older. She works like an adult. I didn't ask too many questions. That's on me. Marissa spoke up. I told her to stop. She didn't listen. Talia wiped her face with the back of her wrist. I was helping. Graham shook his head. You were trying. That's different. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Graham straightened. Go get your bag. You're done here. Talia's eyes widened. Am I in trouble? No, he said, but you're not coming back. She hesitated. What if Mom still needs money? I said you're not coming back, he repeated gently. I'll handle the rest. The words felt foreign coming out of his mouth. He wasn't used to promising things he didn't fully understand yet, but he knew one thing. A child working in a hot kitchen was not going to be part of the solution. As Talia went to grab her backpack from a hook in the corner, Graham turned to Marissa. We're talking. All of us. Not tomorrow, not tonight, now. Marissa nodded weakly. Okay. When Talia returned, she held her backpack close, as if leaving meant she was letting someone down. Graham placed a hand on her shoulder. You did enough, he said quietly. More than enough. She nodded, wiping her eyes again. They started walking toward the exit, but Graham paused right before pushing the door open. He looked back at the kitchen, the smoke, the noise, the chaos, and the small crate Talia had been standing on. His jaw tightened. He turned back to her with new determination, but he didn't yet realize the diner was only the beginning, because the loan wasn't just a bill, and the people behind it weren't the kind of people who let things go. When they stepped back into the sunlight, the warm Alabama air felt heavier somehow. It wasn't the heat. Graham had lived long enough in the South to know real heat. It was the pressure of everything he'd just seen inside that kitchen. Talia walked ahead of them, holding her backpack straps with both hands. She looked smaller than she had just half an hour ago. Like the weight she'd been carrying was finally showing in her posture, Marissa stayed close behind her daughter, checking on her every few seconds as if afraid she'd vanish. Graham unlocked the SUV, and the three of them climbed in without a word. For a moment, nobody started talking. The engine hummed quietly while a family walked into the diner, laughing about something simple and everyday. He took a breath. Okay, I need both of you to help me understand everything. No hiding, no half-truths. Talia sat in the middle seat, looking down at her shoes. I was just trying to help. I know you were, Graham said gently. But you can't do that kind of work. You're too young, and school comes first. Marissa reached over and brushed her daughter's braids back. Baby, I never wanted you in that kitchen. Talia swallowed. But if I didn't help, they said they'd call about the loan. They kept saying they'd come to the apartment. Graham turned sharply toward Marissa. They contacted your daughter? Marissa closed her eyes tight, ashamed. They left messages. I guess she heard some of them. Talia nodded. I heard everything. I always do. Graham gripped the steering wheel. Loan collectors leaving messages frightening enough for a 12-year-old to pick up on? That wasn't just late fees. That was pressure, aggressive pressure. He kept his voice steady. Marissa, start from the beginning. She took a deep breath. Back in December, when I got sick, I missed almost 2 weeks of work at my other cleaning job. They replaced me. I panicked. Rent was due, utilities were behind, and I didn't have enough saved. So I went to one of those loan offices near Dauphin Street. A man there said he could help. What kind of interest? Graham asked, already bracing himself. She shook her head. He said 30%. Talia whispered, at first. Graham froze. At first? Marissa closed her eyes. When you miss even one payment, it becomes almost 50. Then they add fees. Then more fees. He felt sick. That's not a loan, that's a trap. I know that now, she whispered. But at the time, I was desperate. I just needed a way to get through the month. I thought I could pay it back once my hours picked up again. And they didn't, Graham said quietly. Marissa nodded. Then in January, the collector started calling. At first it was polite, then less polite. Talia looked up. They scared me. Graham turned around fully in his seat to face her. What did they say? She hesitated. They said if Mom didn't pay, they'd take our things, or come by the apartment, or talk to her boss. Marissa gasped softly. You never told me they said that. Because you were already tired, Talia whispered, and you were crying every night. I didn't want to make it worse. Graham rubbed his forehead. He'd built entire companies, solved complicated software problems, negotiated deals worth millions. But this situation with a scared child and a mother trying to stay afloat felt like a different world entirely. He turned the engine back on. We're going home. All three of us. Marissa blinked. What are you planning? I'm not sure yet, he admitted, but whatever it is, it starts with getting your daughter out of danger. As he pulled out of the diner parking lot, he noticed something in the rearview mirror. A man standing near the back door of the diner smoking a cigarette, watching them drive away. His stance was too stiff, too focused, like he recognized them. Marissa, Graham said quietly, does anyone from the loan office come by the diner? She followed his gaze. Sometimes. Why? No reason, he murmured, though the knot forming in his stomach told him it wasn't nothing. They drove in silence again until they reached a red light. That's when Talia spoke, her voice fragile but honest. Are you mad at me? Graham glanced at her. No, I'm not mad. You're disappointed? She whispered. I'm worried, he said. You shouldn't be carrying problems that belong to adults. That's not your job. Your job is school, learning, growing, being a kid. None of this should have been on your shoulders. Her chin wobbled and she wiped her eyes. Marissa reached over and held her daughter's hand. Baby, I'm sorry I let things get this far. You did everything you could, Talia murmured. Graham kept driving, but his mind was already working. He wanted to help, needed to help, but he also knew this couldn't be solved with a check alone. These lenders didn't play fair. They didn't just disappear when someone paid them off. People who preyed on desperation always wanted more. He pulled into his driveway 20 minutes later and said, Inside, both of you. We're going to sit down and talk this through. Marissa nodded, wiping her face. Okay. They got out of the car and made their way toward the front door. But the moment Graham unlocked it, his phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, 3 words. Pay up today. He stared at it, feeling the pressure shift into something sharper. This wasn't just a late loan. This was a warning. And if warnings were coming to his phone now, someone had crossed a line. But the real shock was still ahead, because the next message didn't threaten Marissa. It threatened the one person Graham never expected to be dragged into all of this. The second text came through before Graham could even process the first one. This time, it wasn't vague. It wasn't a warning. It was a picture, a blurry shot taken from across the diner parking lot. Not of Graham, not of Marissa, but of Talia, walking toward the SUV with her backpack, Talia, a 12-year-old child. Graham's grip tightened so hard he almost cracked the phone. Marissa noticed immediately. What's wrong? She whispered. He didn't want to show them, but hiding it would only make everything worse. He turned the phone around just enough for Marissa to see. Her hand flew to her mouth. No. They said they wouldn't involve her. Talia looked between them, eyes wide. Mom? What's happening? Graham swallowed hard. Let's go inside now. He locked the door behind them the second they stepped in. The house suddenly felt too quiet again, but not like the night before. This was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, the kind that makes the air feel heavier. Talia sat on the sofa, hugging her knees. Marissa dropped onto the armchair like her legs gave out. Graham paced for a moment, running his hand across the back of his neck. He finally spoke. Okay, we're not dancing around this anymore. Tell me everything about this lone place, names, numbers, anything. Marissa nodded slowly, wiping tears that kept falling. The place is called Southern Advanced Solutions. It's not a bank. It's one of those little storefronts near the highway. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. And the man who gave you the loan? His name's Travis. He's not the type of person you argue with. He acts friendly, but once you owe him, he changes. He came by the apartment once. He said if I didn't pay, they'd collect in other ways. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. Graham clenched his jaw. Did you report him? And tell who? She said with a hopeless laugh. People like me don't get taken seriously. They say it's civil matters, or they say stop borrowing money you don't have. He sat down across from them. You're not alone anymore. Understand that. Talia peeked up. Are they going to come here? No, he said firmly. Nobody is coming near you again. But he didn't fully believe that yet. Not until he came up with a plan. Marissa leaned forward. Mr. Ellington, I don't want you involved in this. They play dirty. They don't care who gets hurt. He shook his head. Too late. They already involved me the moment they sent that picture. And they know where you live now, she whispered. The room fell silent again. Talia finally spoke, her voice small. Are we safe here? Graham turned to her fully. Yes, you hear me? Yes. But she kept staring at him like she could see every doubt he was hiding behind those words. He exhaled slowly and stood. Marissa, let me see all the paperwork again. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and handed him the envelope. Graham unfolded each document on the coffee table, loan agreements covered in tiny print, terms written in intentionally confusing language, threats disguised as reminders. He frowned. This isn't even legally binding. Half of this is garbage meant to scare you. Marissa let out a sob. But it worked. It won't anymore, he said, because I know someone who can handle this. She looked up. A lawyer? Better, he said, an old friend of mine who works with financial crime cases. He grabbed his phone, stepped into the kitchen, and hit a contact he hadn't used in years. The line picked up quickly. Graham Ellington, the voice said. Well, didn't think you still had my number. I need help, Jonah, Graham said, no hesitation. Someone is extorting my housekeeper. Jonah whistled. That's one I haven't heard before. I'm sending you files. I need you to check if this company is even real. Send them, Jonah replied. Give me 15 minutes. Graham ended the call and turned around, only to find Talia standing quietly behind him. She tugged on his sleeve. Can I ask something? Anything. Her voice cracked. Are you mad at my mom? No, he said immediately. Not even a little. She tried so hard, Talia whispered, tears filling her eyes again. She kept saying she'd fix it, but I kept hearing those messages, and I couldn't let her do it alone. Graham crouched, so he was level with her. Look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. You should never have had to hear those things, he said. You should never have had to work in a diner. You should be in school with kids your age, laughing, learning, being a kid, and I'm going to make sure you get that back. She threw her arms around him without warning, and it startled him, but he wrapped his arms around her anyway. It felt like holding someone who'd been trying to be strong for too long. Marissa stood quietly in the doorway, tears running down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Before Graham could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time it was Jonah. He picked up immediately. Talk to me. Jonah didn't waste time. Graham, the company your friend borrowed from, they're not just predatory, they're dirty. How dirty? They're being watched, Jonah said. Money laundering, illegal lending, intimidation tactics, the whole list. Graham's stomach tightened. But here's the part you're not going to like, Jonah continued. The man running this operation, he's not just some loan shark. He's tied to a bigger organization. And once someone owes him money, Jonah paused. He doesn't let go. Graham's eyes lifted slowly toward the living room, where Marissa and Talia sat waiting for a future they didn't even know was hanging by a thread. And Graham, Jonah added, if they sent you a picture of that girl, they're not just watching, they're warning you to stay out. Graham's pulse hammered, not happening. Then be careful, Jonah said. People like this don't care who they hurt. Graham ended the call. He stood there for a moment, gripping the phone, staring into the living room. Because now he understood the truth. This wasn't about a loan anymore. This wasn't about late payments or extra shifts at a diner. This was about a child who had become collateral in a game she didn't even know existed. And Graham Ellington, quiet, private, work-obsessed Graham, was the only person standing between her and something far darker. He walked back into the room, determination replacing every shred of hesitation. We're not hiding anymore, he said. Marissa looked up. What do you mean? I mean, I'm fixing this, he said. All of it. But the ending wasn't written yet, because the hardest part wasn't confronting the loan sharks. It was facing the truth about himself and what he owed to the people he'd overlooked for far too long. Graham didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. He stayed at the kitchen table with every document spread in front of him, his laptop open, his phone plugged in beside him. Every now and then, he'd glance toward the guest room hallway where Marissa and Talia were sleeping, really sleeping, for the first time in weeks. No dishes, no collectors, no fear creeping through the walls. Around 5:30, the sun not even fully up, Graham's phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was Jonah. "You're clear. The operation is being raided this morning. Stay put." Graham exhaled so deeply he felt the tension leave his bones. Finally, one piece of good news. Half an hour later, he heard footsteps, soft ones. Talia peeked into the kitchen, her hair messy from sleep, her eyes still swollen from the night before. "Mr. Ellington?" she whispered. "Morning," he said. "You're up early." She came closer, rubbing her arms through her pajama sleeves. "Did they send more messages?" "No," he said gently. "It's over." She froze. "Over?" He nodded. "The people who threatened your mom, they're being handled. You're safe." Talia blinked, like she didn't believe him. "Really?" "Really." She let out a slow breath and slid into the chair beside him. "What happens now?" Graham closed his laptop and turned to face her. "Now, you get to be 12 again." A small, tired smile finally formed on her face. "I don't know if I remember how." "You will," he said. "Trust me." A few minutes later, Marissa walked into the kitchen, still tying her hair back. "Morning," she whispered. "I heard voices." Graham stood. "Sit, both of you." Marissa's eyes widened. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "Something's right for once." He pulled out the chair for her, then sat across from them. "I talked to my friend," he explained. "Your loan was illegal. The people behind it were already under investigation. They're done. And your debt, gone." Marissa covered her mouth. "Gone?" "Gone," he repeated. "You don't owe a single dollar." She burst into tears, not the quiet tears from before, full, uncontrollable relief pouring out like she'd been carrying a mountain for months. Talia leaned into her mother and hugged her tight. "See? I told you it would get better." Marissa kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I just never thought it would be today." Graham waited until Marissa's breathing settled before he added, "And there's more." Both mother and daughter looked at him. "I'm putting money toward your rent for the next few months," he said. "Not as charity, as stability. You need space to rebuild." "Mr. Ellington, I can't." "You can," he interrupted softly. "And you will. You've spent your whole life helping everyone else. Let someone help you." Marissa nodded slowly, tears still falling. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't," he said. "Just promise me something." She wiped her cheeks. "Anything. Let your daughter go back to school. Let her have the life she deserves." Marissa reached over and held Talia's hand. "I promise." Talia looked up at Graham again, voice small but steady. "Does this mean I don't have to work anymore?" He smiled gently. "No more kitchens, no more early mornings, no more carrying problems bigger than you." Relief washed over her face, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked like a kid again. Just a kid. They spent the rest of the morning talking, laughing, planning. Marissa made breakfast for the first time in days without rushing. Talia showed him drawings she'd hidden in her backpack, things she made while sitting in the corner of the diner before the rush hits, before anyone noticed she had talent. Graham looked at those drawings and felt something shift inside him. He'd spent years building companies, chasing numbers, living in his own world of screens and meetings, but this, helping this family, felt more real than anything he'd built. By afternoon, the house felt different, lighter, safer, and while the fear hadn't vanished completely, it no longer ran the show. As Marissa gathered her things to take Talia to school the next day, she paused by the door. "You didn't have to do any of that, Mr. Ellington." "I know," he said, "but I should have helped sooner." She nodded, her voice soft. "You helped exactly when we needed it." When the door closed behind them, Graham stood in the foyer for a moment, letting the silence settle. Not the eerie, heavy silence from before. A new kind, peaceful, earned. The kind that comes only after choosing to do the right thing, and he finally understood something he should have learned long ago. You don't have to save the whole world. just the world of the people right in front of you. But here's the thing. Stories like this don't stay stories. They're happening around us every single day. Kids carrying burdens they shouldn't. Parents drowning in bills they never meant to fall behind on. People working quietly, hoping someone sees them before they break. So here's my message to you, whoever's listening. Pay attention. Look closer. Care a little more than you think you need to. Sometimes the smallest act of help, the one you think doesn't matter, is the thing that saves someone's life. And if this story moved you, taught you something, or opened your eyes, share it. Comment your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe so more stories like this reach the people who need them most.